Number 10. Rewriting emails multiple times before sending. You know that moment right before you hit send on an email, where your finger is hovering over the mouse, but your brain whispers, wait, check it again. So you do. And suddenly, what was originally a simple message becomes a full emotional rewrite. Not because the information changed, but because you're terrified the tone might be misread. A missing comma feels like a personal flaw. An extra space becomes a silent embarrassment. And you don't just correct errors, you correct imagined judgments. You reread the message as if the world's reputation court is waiting on the other side. You analyze. Does this sound too blunt? Too emotional? Too passive? Too confident? Too uncertain? Too human? Because somewhere deep down, you believe the smallest imperfection exposes too much of you. So you rewrite the same sentence 5 times trying to make it sound intelligent, but not arrogant. Warm, but not clingy, professional, but not robotic. It's not communication, it's performance. And maybe you call it being careful, being thorough, or just wanting clarity. But sometimes, it's not about clarity. It's about control. It's about perfection disguised as responsibility. It's about the fear of being misunderstood, rejected, or seen as less than what you hope people believe you are. And when you finally hit send, do you relax? No. You think about it again. You replay it. You wait for a reply like it's a report card. Because deep inside, it's not just an email. It's proof of competence, proof of worth, proof that you didn't disappoint. Number 9. Editing documents for hours over small errors. You open a document intending to make a few quick adjustments, but minutes turn into hours, and the deeper you go, the louder the discomfort becomes. One sentence looks slightly off, so you refine it. Then the paragraph beside it suddenly feels unbalanced, so you reshape that too. Then you notice a comma out of rhythm, a word slightly repetitive, a phrasing that could be smoother. What should have been 5 minutes becomes a silent marathon. Because you don't just correct mistakes, you chase perfection that never stops shifting. And it's never good enough. There's always one more improvement, one more polish, one more adjustment that feels necessary before the document can safely exist outside your control. People say, no one will notice that detail, but you notice. Your brain fixates on the tiny flaws most people would skim past without a thought. Because to you, small errors aren't small. They're evidence of failure. They whisper, you should have done better. And so you keep editing until the word stops scratching at your nerves, or until exhaustion wins. Sometimes perfection becomes a prison, not because someone else demands it, but because you do. And in that chase, hours disappear, peace disappears, and ironically, the final product becomes less about expression and more about protection. Protection from judgment, from embarrassment, from the unbearable idea that something you created could be seen as imperfect. Number 8. Needing symmetrical organization on desks. There's a moment, right before you begin any task, where the world pauses and your attention shifts to the objects around you. A pen slightly angled, a notebook off-center, 2 items similar in size but not aligned. And suddenly, the task can wait because your environment feels wrong. Not messy, not chaotic, just uneven. To someone else, it's nothing. To you, it's noise. Visual noise, mental noise, emotional noise. So you straighten the pen, you align the notebook perfectly parallel to the desk edge. You center the laptop and adjust the mouse until it sits in perfect balance with the keyboard. And when everything finally lines up, just right, something inside you exhales. Your breathing slows. Your body releases tension you didn't even realize it was holding. Because symmetry isn't just a preference, it's stability. It's the illusion that life, decisions, emotions, and expectations are manageable. That if the outside world sits in harmony, maybe the inside world will stop spiraling. Some people clean to impress others. You organize to calm your mind. The desk becomes a controlled universe, where everything has a purpose and position, where nothing is unpredictable, where chaos cannot enter without permission. But here's the quiet truth. Sometimes the desk isn't the only thing you're trying to arrange. You're trying to rearrange your thoughts, your fears, your uncertainties. And symmetry becomes less about order and more about relief. Because when life feels overwhelming, unpredictable, or imperfect, at least your desk, your small corner of reality, can remain perfectly aligned. Number 7. Spending hours planning a simple task. It starts with something small, something anyone else would just do without thinking. Maybe it's sending a message, going to the gym, making a phone call, starting a project, or completing a simple errand. But instead of beginning, your mind says, wait, think it through first. So you plan, you make a list, then another list, better, clearer, more structured. Then you reorganize that list because the order isn't logical enough yet. You think about timing, sequence, consequences, the perfect moment, the perfect approach, and suddenly, a task that takes 10 minutes has already taken an hour of mental rehearsal. And you justify it by calling it preparation, efficiency, strategy. But sometimes, planning isn't about being organized. It's about avoiding the fear of doing something imperfectly. Because once you start, there's no more buffer, no more safe distance between you and mistakes, no more time to refine, edit, or control how things unfold. Planning gives you the illusion of mastery. Execution demands vulnerability. So you research, you compare methods, you watch tutorials, you spend time imagining the outcome, managing every possible scenario, scripting every detail so nothing surprises you. But deep down, you know the truth. You are not preparing for the task. You're preparing for every possible judgment attached to it. And sometimes, by the time you finish planning, you're too mentally exhausted to do the thing at all. People see hesitation, but inside, it feels like survival, a desperate attempt to prevent failure, embarrassment, or regret before it even exists. Because in your world, doing something imperfectly feels worse than not doing it at all. Number 6. Avoiding group projects for fear of mistakes. When someone says, "Let's work together," most people think teamwork, shared effort, maybe even fun. But for you, those words trigger something heavier, an instant wave of tension. Because group projects don't feel like collaboration, they feel like a loss of control. You've learned that when multiple people have influence, mistakes happen. Corners get cut, standards slip, details get ignored. And the fear isn't just that something will go wrong, it's that your name will be attached to the flaw. So instead of delegating, you absorb the responsibility. You overcarry the workload. You silently redo what others have done because good enough doesn't feel good enough when it reflects you. And the worst part isn't the effort. It's the anxiety of watching someone else handle something you could perfect yourself. While others trust the process, you track every detail. While others shrug off errors, you replay them like warnings. While others believe mistakes are a natural part of teamwork, you fear they'll expose weakness, inefficiency, or lack of competence. Sometimes, avoiding group work isn't about disliking people. It's about protecting your standards and your reputation. Deep down, you don't want to rely on anyone because if something fails, at least you'll know exactly where the fault came from. You, only you. Control becomes a shield. Independence becomes a comfort zone. And while people may call it stubbornness or perfectionism, the truth is simpler. You'd rather carry everything alone than risk being seen as someone who allowed imperfection, especially if that imperfection could have been prevented. Number 5. Practicing presentations obsessively. Most people practice a presentation to remember the flow. You practice it to control the outcome. You rehearse not once, not twice, but over and over, until every pause, every tone shift, every breath feels measured and intentional. The moment a sentence doesn't sound right, you start again, because the idea of stumbling in front of others feels unbearable. You don't just memorize the words. You memorize how those words should sound. You rehearse facial expressions, hand gestures, pacing, even the exact moment where a smile should appear. You don't want to just deliver the message. You want to leave no room for misinterpretation, awkwardness, or doubt. There's a fear underneath the preparation. Subtle, silent, persistent. If I speak imperfectly, they will see me as less. So you practice in the mirror. You record your voice. You rehearse while walking, while showering, while lying in bed trying to sleep. You repeat the same sentence until it has no errors, no hesitation, no weakness. People may think you're being thorough. They see dedication, discipline, professionalism. What they don't see is how tightly perfection grips your nervous system, how one imagined mistake can consume your thoughts long before the audience ever hears a word. And when the presentation finally happens, the outside world hears a polished voice. But inside, you're listening for flaws, you're analyzing reactions, you're scanning for signs that you did well enough, clear enough, flawless enough. And even after applause, you replay the entire performance in your head, searching for a moment you wish you could redo. Because for you, the goal isn't to be heard. It's to never be questioned, never be judged, never appear anything less than perfectly prepared. Number 4. Checking grammar in casual texts. Most people send a casual message without thinking twice. A typo? A missing period? A chaotic sentence? They shrug and hit send. But for you, even a simple OK becomes a mini editing session. Before a message leaves your phone, it has already survived multiple rounds of silent proofreading. Grammar, tone, punctuation, emotional meaning. You rewrite a short text because the first version sounded too dry. Then you soften it with an emoji, only to delete it because it feels unprofessional. You check capitalization, not because anyone cares, but because you care. A part of you fears that a poorly written message makes you look careless, lazy, or unintelligent. So you polish even the quickest responses, choosing words like you're curating a public statement, not texting a friend. While others type quickly, your brain whispers rules. Does this sound rude? Is this too long? Does this period make it seem angry? Should I rewrite that phrase so it sounds clearer, kinder, smarter? Sometimes you send a message, then reread it, then overthink it, then wish you could unsend it because maybe the tone wasn't what you intended. This isn't about grammar. It's about identity, about control, about not leaving room for misunderstanding, judgment, or embarrassment. You want your words to represent you accurately, perfectly, safely. And while most people communicate to connect, you communicate to avoid regret. Because somewhere deep down, you believe a poorly constructed sentence is more than a mistake. It's a reflection of who you are, and you'd rather take extra seconds editing than feel the sting of, I should have written that differently. Number 3. Cleaning spaces already spotless. There's a strange moment when you walk into a room that's already clean, perfectly arranged, nothing out of place, yet your mind scans the space like a security system searching for threats. A pillow slightly angled, a tiny speck no one else would notice, a surface that looks fine, but not flawless. And suddenly, you're not relaxing, you're cleaning. Not because it's dirty, but because it's not perfect. Cleaning, for you, isn't just a task, it's a ritual, a way to calm the noise inside your head. Each swipe, each adjustment, each tiny correction gives your brain a moment of relief, like control is finally something you can touch. For others, cleaning happens when chaos appears. For you, chaos appears when there's nothing left to clean. Your mind whispers, what if I miss something? What if someone notices what I didn't? What if this isn't as perfect as it looks? So you straighten the same object twice. You rearrange items no one touched. You polish surfaces that have no dust. And maybe you don't even realize how exhausting it feels, because perfection has become your normal, not your effort. But here's the deeper truth. You aren't cleaning the room. You're trying to clean the feeling, the anxiety, the pressure, the silent belief that if everything looks flawless, then maybe, just maybe, you will feel flawless too. But perfection is greedy. It never says thank you. It never says stop. It never says enough. And sometimes you don't clean because things are wrong. You clean because the silence of imperfection feels louder than the act itself. Number 2. Avoiding hobbies you can't master instantly. Some people try new hobbies just for fun. They paint badly, play instruments off-key, bake lopsided cookies, and laugh about it. But for you, trying something new isn't exciting. It's uncomfortable, because the idea of being bad at something, even temporarily, feels like a threat. When you start a new skill, you don't want to learn slowly. You want to excel immediately. You want precision, fluency, mastery on day one. And if it doesn't happen, your brain whispers, if you can't do it perfectly, why do it at all? So instead of exploring, you avoid. Instead of experimenting, you withdraw. Instead of saying, I'm learning, you say, it's not really my thing. But deep down, it isn't disinterest. It's discomfort with imperfection. You watch others enjoying trial and error, embracing mistakes like stepping stones. But to you, mistakes feel like scars. Every failed attempt becomes evidence, not progress. And you don't want to feel amateur, unskilled, or exposed while learning. You want to skip the messy part, the awkward beginnings, the crooked attempts, the slow improvement. Because in your world, worth is tied to competence, not curiosity. So you stick to what you know, to the tasks you're confident in, to the areas where excellence feels attainable and control stays intact. But there's a silent cost. You miss the joy of discovering yourself in imperfection. You miss the freedom of being a beginner. You miss the softness of learning without pressure. And sometimes, avoiding new hobbies isn't about lack of interest at all. It's about protecting yourself from the vulnerable truth that mastery requires patience, mistakes, and being imperfect before you ever become great. Number 1. Criticizing yourself after small wins. You achieve something, maybe a task, a goal, a milestone most people would celebrate. Someone congratulates you, calls it impressive, meaningful, or well done. And for a brief second you feel proud. But before the feeling settles, another voice rises inside you. You could have done better. It wasn't that hard. Anyone else would have done more. What should feel like accomplishment turns into analysis. Instead of recognizing progress, you scan for flaws. Instead of celebrating the effort, you compare it to an impossible standard. Small wins don't feel like achievements. They feel like incomplete attempts. You replay what you missed, what you could have improved, what you didn't do perfectly. The praise from others feels undeserved, almost uncomfortable, like they're seeing a version of you that you don't believe you earned. You brush it off with a joke. You say, it was nothing. You minimize your own effort because admitting success feels wrong, or premature, or arrogant. Somewhere deep inside, you're convinced that perfection, not progress, is the only standard worth acknowledging. Anything less isn't worthy of celebration because, in your mind, the win is only real if there were 0 mistakes, 0 uncertainty, 0 hesitation. So instead of allowing accomplishment to motivate you, you let self-criticism take over. You move on quickly, not because you're driven, but because resting in achievement feels unfamiliar, almost unsafe. But here's the quiet truth. You're not refusing to celebrate because you're humble. You're refusing because you don't believe you're enough. And until you learn to honor the small victories, the big ones will never feel like victories at all.